This video is a quick guide about what Arduino is and basics about Arduino UNO. Some of you may have heard about Arduino and many of you don't. Arduino is an open source hardware and software company that designs and manufactures single board microcontrollers and microcontroller kits for building digital devices. It also has its project and user community. This is the logo of Arduino open source community. You may be wondering, what is open source? Open source products are those whose data is stored in a public repository and shared publicly. Anyone can access the repository to use the data independently or contribute improvements to the design and functionality of the product. There are numerous development boards by Arduino. The most famous ones are Arduino UNO. This is the most commonly used board and perfect fit for the beginners. We will be discussing about it in detail in later. Then we have Arduino Nano and Arduino Pro Mini. These two boards are comparatively smaller in size and has less memory as well as less number of input-output pins. We also have Arduino Mega. Arduino Mega is the largest among these four and has most storage memory as well as the most number of input output pins, which enable us to connect many IO devices. Now we will be discussing about Arduino UNO. This is an Arduino UNO board. Every electronic components need some power to run on. UNO has an operating voltage of 5 volt. It can withstand a voltage range of 7 to 20 volts. It has an onboard voltage regulator which provides the board with a regulated power supply of a 5 volt from a DC source. There are three ways to power up the Arduino. The first one is through a DC power jack by plugging a 2.1 mm center positive plug. The second way is to use the power pins. You can connect the positive end of the battery in the V-in and the negative end at the ground denoted by G and D. Power pins are also used as input voltage to IO devices such as sensors. UNO has a 5 volt as well as 3.3 volt output pin. The third way is to power up through your PC using an A to B USB cable. This port is basically used to program UNO board. But if we are programming the board, where the code gets stored and what executes the program? The answer is Atmega 328P microcontroller IC. This is the heart and brain of the Arduino UNO board, and every other component on the board plays a supporting role to the IC. The Atmega 328P IC has the flash memory of 32 KB, of which 0.5 KB is used by the bootloader. The flash memory is where the code gets stored. SRAM 2 KB. This SRAM is the runtime memory of the Arduino board. It also has an EEPROM of 1 KB. This memory is where the data is stored which doesn't get deleted when we power off the Arduino board. Every microcontroller needs a clock frequency to work on. UNO works at a clock frequency of 16 MHz provided by a 16 MHz crystal oscillator. It may happen that working of UNO board is interrupted due to an error and we want the program execution to start again. Here's when the reset pin comes into play. When this switch is clicked, it sends a logical pulse to the reset pin of the microcontroller and now runs the program again from the start. We now have talked a lot about the Arduino board, but where to connect the sensors and IO devices? UNO provides us with the digital IO pins as well as analog pins. The Arduino UNO board has 6 analog pins labeled 0 to 5. These pins can read the signal from the analog sensors such as temperature sensor and convert it into the digital value for system understanding. These pins just measure the voltage and not the current because they have very high internal resistance. Hence, only a small amount of current flows through these pins. Although these pins are labeled analog and are analog input by default, these pins can also be used for digital input or output. The board has 14 digital I/O pins. You can find these pins labeled as digital 0 to 30. These pins can be used as either input pins or output pins. When used as output, these pins act as a power supply source for the components connected to it, and when used as an input pins, they read the signals from the component connected to it. When digital pins are used as output pins, they supply 40 milliamps of current at 5 volt, which is more than enough to light an LED. Some of the digital pins are labeled with a tilt symbol next to the pin numbers 3, 5, 6, 9, 10 and 11. These pins act as normal digital pins but can also be used as pulse width modulation (PWM) pins, which stimulates analog output such as fading an LED in and out. So this was all about Arduino UNO.